What if the most powerful woman in modern history made one final decision that quietly reshaped her entire family? A decision so discreet, so carefully hidden that even the people closest to her didn't know the truth until it was far too late. Because in March 2026, something surfaced. Not a rumor, not speculation, but official, registered documents filed under Scottish law. Documents that revealed a private royal arrangement the palace never intended the public to see. At the center of it all, Lady Louise Windsor, a name rarely in headlines, rarely photographed, rarely discussed. And yet, she was chosen to receive lifetime rights to a private cottage on the Balmoral estate. Not just any cottage, the very same one that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle believed had been set aside for them. And in that single revelation, everything changed. Because this isn't just about property, this is about trust, about loyalty, and about the Queen's final judgment, made in silence. To understand why this decision carries so much weight, we need to step back. Summer 2022, Balmoral Castle, a place unlike any other royal residence, remote, private, untouched by the noise of public life, over 50,000 acres of land, forests, rivers, hills, and history stretching back generations. For Queen Elizabeth II, this wasn't just a retreat, it was home, and that summer it would become something else, her final chapter. Those closest to her say she understood that time was limited, and so she began quietly putting things in order, not publicly, not ceremonially, but privately, carefully, deliberately. In August, she extended an invitation to Prince Harry and Meghan. At that point, the relationship between them and the royal family had already been strained. The Oprah interview, the public revelations, the growing distance. But the Queen remained different. She didn't close doors, she opened them, one last time. During that visit, she showed them something, a place hidden within the estate. Garden Cottage, a 7-bedroom stone house surrounded by trees, shielded from view. A place designed for silence, for reflection, for family. Historically, it had been offered to trusted members of the royal family. Princess Anne had stayed there. Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had used it in their early years. It was never public, never discussed, only quietly passed between those within the inner circle. And now, Harry and Meghan were standing inside it. According to insiders, the Queen told them it was available, that it could serve as a base should they ever return, a place for their children, a place to reconnect. And when they left Balmoral, they carried that belief with them, that this cottage was meant to be theirs. But behind the scenes, something else had already been decided, something final. Because while that conversation was happening, the Queen had already made her choice, a choice she never explained, never announced, and never reversed. In October 2022, just weeks after her passing, King Charles III formalized the arrangement. Garden Cottage was placed into a private trust, and the beneficiary was not Harry, not Meghan, but Lady Louise Windsor, granted lifetime tenancy. A decision locked in, legally binding, irreversible. And yet, no one spoke about it. For years, it remained hidden until March 2026, because under Scottish law, long-term tenancy agreements must be recorded, and once those records were filed, the story became public. And that's when everything shifted. Because that's when Harry found out, not through a conversation, not through the family, but through a notification, a headline, while sitting thousands of miles away in California. Sources say the reaction was immediate, a call, direct to King Charles III, questions, confusion, frustration. Harry believed the cottage had been promised to him, but Charles's response was clear: The decision had been the Queen's, finalized before her death, and in matters like this, intention means nothing without documentation. For Harry, this wasn't just disappointing, it was personal. Because Balmoral wasn't just land, it was memory. It was where he spent summers with Princess Diana, learning to fish, walking through the Highlands, experiencing a version of life that felt almost normal, away from cameras, away from expectation. And now that connection felt distant, like something quietly taken away. So the question becomes, why Lady Louise? Why her above all others? The answer lies in something far more powerful than status, because to the Queen, this wasn't about hierarchy, it was about character, consistency, and presence. Lady Louise had never sought attention, never given interviews, never stepped into controversy. She lived quietly, studied, stayed close to family. After the passing of Prince Philip, she became one of the Queen's closest companions, especially at Balmoral. They spent hours together, often in the stables, discussing Philip's carriage driving, preserving his legacy, not for the public, but for themselves. And over time, a bond formed, quiet, strong, unspoken. According to those who understood the Queen best, she believed something very simple. Loyalty is proven through presence, not words, not statements, not promises, but presence. Lady Louise was present. Harry had chosen a different life, a different path. And whether right or wrong, the Queen made her decision based on that difference. But the story doesn't end with the cottage, because along with it came something even more meaningful. Personal belongings, private items, things never meant to leave the family. Watercolor paintings, created by the Queen herself. Tartan fabrics, carrying decades of memory. And most importantly, a handwritten journal, spanning years, decades of thoughts, reflections from her earliest days as monarch to her final summer. And in its last entries, she reportedly named Lady Louise as the one she trusted to maintain the family's connection to Scotland. Think about that. That's not inheritance, that's legacy. And in a family built on tradition, legacy is everything. So where does this leave the royal family now? More divided than before, because within royal circles, nothing is ever just a house. Every decision carries meaning, every gesture sends a message, and this message was unmistakable, a quiet but powerful signal of who remains within the inner circle and who no longer does. For Harry and Meghan, the path forward becomes clearer, not easier, but clearer. A future separate from royal structure, from royal inheritance, from royal expectation. And for Lady Louise, nothing changes. No public statements, no interviews, no reaction, just silence. The same silence she has always maintained. But inside that silence, she now holds something rare, something the Queen valued above everything else. Not land, not status, but trust. And inside the royal family, there is nothing more powerful than that.